Hi everybody, this is my second video regarding the DHK Maximus. Um, this video will be sharing you the tips I have after running it for 3 years now. So the first tip I would suggest to you, it's rather a tip for every RC car that you have in your collection, I would say, is to replace every original steel screws by stainless steel one, just for the sake of not stripping down the screws that have rusted on you, especially for the bottom screws. They are very subject to rust. The hex shape is rusting, and especially those small flathead screw on the bottom, they don't have much. The X shape is not that deep, so when rust gets in it, then it's very easy to strip and to have a hard time to remove a screw. So the tip I would give to you is that every time you're working on something, and then you have the opportunity, you have the screws in hand, then you have the opportunity to change them for stainless steel ones. And the socket screws like this, compared to the original button head screws, have deeper hexes shape, so it's gonna be easier for you to unscrew and screw, and not strip on you. Plus, stainless steel is harder than mild steel, so that's a good upgrade. Very easy to do. And to do so, I purchased myself some kits like this that from AliExpress. They are very cheap. This is M3 bolts. This is M3 bolts also, but there are flatheads. And this is a M4 kit, and I think they are like $10 per boxes, and it's really worth the money at the end of the day. The other tip, it would be for the chuck attachment points. Of course, like I mentioned, you should change the screws for stainless steel one, and so the tip I would like to share is to replace the original screw with a longer one, and put a nylon lock nut just behind it, so you're firmly securing the top attachment point, compared to the original screw that is just holding onto the back plastic part here. The threads are pulling on the 3mm thick plastic sheet here, so it's not that strong. And since it is kind of a lever action, the chuck is pushing kind of with a lever action with the bolt. There's induces a lot of stress here, and the screws will back out on you. So replace it with a longer one and secure it with a nut behind it. It's gonna be much sturdier. The other tip in the same area would be the attachment point. And the original setup that when I received the Maximus 3 years ago, the attachment point was the hole here, the bottom hole here. And what was happening is that when the truck was bottoming down on the ground, when the chassis was touching the ground, in fact it was not touching the ground, it was the chuck bottoming out at the end of their action before the chassis was touching down. So when I was landing, all the stress of the impact, all the energy was not transferred to the ground by the chassis to the ground, but instead into the attachment point down there, all the chuck assembly and the attachment point up here. So what I made is just a simple change, but just to be aware that if your attachment point is down here, you're gonna induce a lot of stress. You're gonna maybe bend some shock tower. In my case, I ended up puncturing a lot of bladder inside my chucks, and I was feeling hair inside my fluid, inside my chuck oil all the time. And I discovered that it was because the attachment point was too low. and the end of the shock shaft was puncturing the bladder up here. So just be careful. Check if your chassis is bottoming down here on the ground and you have still a little bit of room here left. A little bit of a shock travel left still, like this. So you're gonna make sure that all the energy is transferred from the chassis to the ground and not through the chucks. The other tip I would like to share to you is kind of an unusual tip. I think if you have watched my first video, you know that I'm a guy that like better reliability rather than having aluminum parts everywhere or carbon fiber fancy parts. I'm more towards flexible parts that have give to it and makes my car reliable each run I'm running with it. So this one is meant to the A-arm, is related to the A-arm strength. I ended up breaking a bunch of them, especially at the attachment point at the diff case where the hinge pin is, especially when I was, by mistake of course, hitting something with the front tires on either side. So I did try to print myself in different material arms instead of purchasing arms, but at the end of the day, the printed parts were not as strong as the original injected parts. So what I ended up doing, I'll show you, is that. I don't know if you see already what I did, but here it's different than the original. If I go lower to the, I'm just gonna drop it on the table. Here, you see that there's a hex shape on the back A-arm, on the rear A-arm, and I do not have any more X shape here at the front A-arm. So what that does is that it reduces a bit the stiffness of the A-arm here. The whole A-arm is less stiff to the attachment point. So if I hit something with my front tire, or if I land on it sideways, now it's gonna now bend instead of transferring all this energy to the hinge pin and the diff case and rip everything off. So it's just gonna bend and you'll be able to ride just after your bad hit without breaking anything. And it doesn't make it very flexible. I mean, I cannot really, even if I apply a lot of force to it, you won't see it bend. I mean, I have to put it on a vise and with pliers try to bend it to really see the difference between a modified arm and an unmodified arm. So probably on slow motion footage on a bad hit you could see it flex, but it doesn't make it flimsy. That's what I mean. Okay, the other one, I was looking at my notes. The other tips is regarding the hub carriers, the front hub carriers. You probably have, like I did, a lot of screw here unscrewing on you during a bashing session. That happened to me all the time, and I was pretty frustrated. And when that occurred, the boat is backing up a little bit, backing out, and so it grabs to only few threads, and then it rips the threads off when it finally comes off. So when it does that several times, then you end up stripping the whole threads that it was holding to. So what I ended up doing, of course, I was having a a few spare of those because they were stripping quite a bit. So I decided, being a mechanical engineer, I decided to repair them instead of buying and buying and buying. So I purchased myself Illy coils like this. So they are tiny coils with the same thread pitch, but that fits in the bigger diameter, and the inner diameter of the coil is the same than the threads in there. They are M4. So, and what I discovered doing that repair is that the part that I have repaired with Illy coil ended up being on the vehicle for almost more than a year compared to the one that was straight aluminum. Just because I think what it did is that it increased the strength of the thread on which the screw is biting to, and removed completely the weakness of the aluminum, I would say. So if you're interested into improving those parts in terms of reliability, you should just re-drill them with a helical kit. So that means that you have to drill bigger. The drill comes with it, the drill bit comes with it, and the tap comes with it also. And then you just have to screw the helicoil with red Loctite. You screw the helicoil with red Loctite in there, and then you wait for the Loctite to set. And then with blue Loctite, when you assemble it into the vehicle, then everything is really secured. And I can really feel it when I screw it with my screwdriver. I really feel it very firm. I mean, I twist my screwdriver and then it locks right there, like I were screwing like twice as big screw than this one in the middle part. So yes, that's another tip I can give you. The other one is regarding the same part, but in a different area. I don't really like to have play into my steering rack or my steering assembly. And I was constantly having one here. Sorry. There's a play between the screw here and the ball on which the rod end is rocking, and this is not removable really, because you cannot screw that C shape here. You cannot capture the the ball between the two walls. So what I did is I made a slit here with a saw with a metal blade. Just my camera doesn't want to focus. So I made a slit here, so it's now flexible enough. The slit happens to be on the non-threaded side, and this gives it enough flexibility to be able to pinch the ball between the two fingers and to stop it from moving around the bolt in which it is captured. So that's another tip for your steering precision. I have tried. Next tip: don't buy these. These are the aluminum upgrades that you can find on your owner manuals and on AliExpress or Banggood or anywhere you have bought your DHK Maximus. This one is the axle carrier for the rear wheels. This is the C-hub replacement part in aluminum for the front wheels, and they happen to be, at least the one I received, they happen to be crap. Yeah, they happen to be crap. Because first thing is that the fit between that hole, which is the pivot hole, the bottom pivot hole here, is very loose. There is way too much play between the pin and that hole, so it makes, when you grab your tire, you feel that something is wrong, something is not tightened, and then you verify, and then it's fine. It's just that the fit between the parts is very poor. And if you have watched my first video, I have modified my C-hubs, my plastic original C-hubs with bearings in it, and with that part I cannot really do it, just because it's not malleable. It doesn't happen to be the good dimension for the axle carrier and the bearing stacking up. So that cannot be happening with that. And it's the same thing for the rear part. The fit with the pin and that hole is very poor. Your wheel is just gonna rattle because of that fit being poor, and also the bearing fit is very poor. The bearings should not spin by the outer race. It should spin by the balls inside. And in fact, I can just push the bearing. I mean, the bearing is sliding itself inside, but it should be normally a little hammer fit, like we call it in the technical term, but it's not. It's loose, so it's bad. The top screw threads here, options, I'm not sure what to do with it. Further inward or further outward of the vehicle. I used the one that was mimicking the plastic parts, but I didn't play with the other one to see what was the vehicle behavior, because anyway, I didn't like the fit here and the bearings fit. But there's no issue with that top portion of the part, but everything else that's a good idea. That could have been a beautiful part to put on the vehicle that would have not compromised the reliability of my truck, but it's not precise enough to my taste. The other tip I would give you, my DHK 3 years ago came with the ESC mounted here between the servo and the steering rack, and there's just not enough space for it, just because the wires, no matter on which side it was, but the wires were just crushed by the steering rod here moving backward and forward. It was crushing on it. So I decided to mount it here on top there with zip ties, which I ran my vehicle with that setup, I think, for 2 years, and it was really serving me well. And there was no cable issue here. Lately I have mounted it here more in the middle of the vehicle, because I wanted to play a little bit with my weight bias, my weight distribution, but I haven't really decided if that is better to put it there or if it is still better to put it in the front. I just wanted to have a little bit more wheelie, easy. I want to have more ease for wheeling with the car, but I didn't really see a difference. I don't know if I will keep it there, but it's just to try. I can now talk about the diff holes I have set up right now. If you receive a truck like this, at least mine 3 years ago came with the center diff oil that I think it was just grease. It was liquid, and all the power was bleeding to the front wheels, and it was not very that made a poor acceleration and poor understeering. A vehicle that was understeering. And I found that at first I put 100,000 CST viscosity oil, and that improved a lot, and that was a funnier car to drive for sure. Now I have a 500,000 CST thick oil in the center diff, and now it's almost a lock center diff with that high viscosity oil. I think just to have a better compromise between drivability and bashability, I would maybe put a 200. So if you're looking for like the best words, I suggest you 200. What I have currently is a 500,000. I think it's a little bit too much, but I don't want to purchase a bottle of oil just for the sake of trying. Then my front diff oil currently is at 30,000 CST, and my rear diff oil is at 10,000 CST oil. I like to have a little bit thicker oil on the front, so it's more directional on the throttle, and a lighter oil on the back, so I don't get too much oversteering or fishtailing when you push the throttle after leaving a curve. So that's my diff oil. My shock oils, with the original shock, I was putting 80 CST oil. I think it's a fair amount of damping for absorbing landings. I think it's a little bit too much if you're looking for a very nervous car and have good traction, but I'm more a driving style oriented to bashing, so I prefer to have more damping, so the chassis is not hitting the ground with a small jump. It needs a little bit bigger jump to touch the ground. During the winter, I lower it to 60 because during the winter, in the cold weather, the oil get thicker, so I lower it to 60. Lately, I have purchased new entire truck assembly, and I have discovered a very, very poor design change. I don't know if you have that. Maybe somebody can comment. But this is now, I believe that it is now. Maybe it's not the case. I may have received a wrong part. I don't know. But this is the shock shaft, and it was not that before. It was a shock shaft with threaded ends on both ends. Both ends were threaded, and now the piston is kind of a nail, and the head of the nail is the piston, which I really don't like, because now there's no more holes for the oil to pass through for your damping action compared to the original piston. This is the piston that should go through on the original shaft with the little holes. Sorry, it was a little bit fast. And the diameter was fairly close to the inner diameter of the shock body. So the shock shaft, sorry, was guided by the bottom, by here. I don't know what's the name of that? It's the bottom end of the shock body. Get in there. Anyway, so yes, the shock shaft is guided by the bottom end of the shock body, and was guided also by the shock shaft piston. So that made like two guiding points. So the shock shaft was fairly guided straight. But now with that assembly, with that part, this piston is loose. The fit between the two diameters here, woo, damn, the fit between the two diameters is very poor, and to let the oil pass through the sides of the piston and the side of the shock body. So this leaves us only the guiding point of the bottom. So when the shock shaft is completely out, you can just take it and move it at an angle like this, and I really don't like that. It's gonna rack and jam, what I believe. So I don't know if it's just the parts that I receive, or it's now that we are going to receive in the future. But I was really disappointed. Yeah, this is pretty much wrapping up all the tips I have for the DHK Maximus. So if you have another suggestion, just put it in the comment below. Thank you.